Hello, and thank you for joining us. Authorities have charged a, quote, strong person of interest in connection with last week's killing of the UnitedHealthcare CEO. Luigi Mangione is an Ivy League-educated University of Pennsylvania graduate who has roots in Maryland and Hawaii. The 26-year-old was arrested in central Pennsylvania Monday, more than 250 miles from where the shooting occurred in Midtown Manhattan. Police say a customer at a McDonald's alerted an employee who called local authorities, saying a man resembling the suspected shooter was at one of their locations. Mangione was arraigned in a Pennsylvania courtroom and denied bail. He faces initial charges of forgery, carrying a firearm without a license, tampering with records, being an instrument to a crime, and falsely identifying himself to law enforcement. Police found a gun, fake IDs, and documents on Mangione that suggest he had, quote, some ill will toward corporate America. Earlier, authorities gave an update on how they were able to apprehend the 26-year-old.
He then provided a fake identification card out of New Jersey. After a brief investigation, it was determined that the ID provided was in fact a fake ID, and he was subsequently arrested for a forgery charge.
I want to go to CBS News correspondent Lilia Luciano, who's joining us now from Altoona, Pennsylvania. Lily, you arrived there today. You're in front of the McDonald's. What more do we know about what unfolded there today that led to this arrest and what you're seeing?
One thing that we just learned, Lindsay, from police, although they had reported earlier that, of course, that it was an employee who called law enforcement, who said the person looked like the person of interest, that it was apparently a customer at McDonald's who told the employee. So at least you have two people there who did what Governor Shapiro called, the right thing to do. He stressed how disturbing it has been to see the backlash or even support for what happened on social media, and applauded the actions of these two witnesses and, of course, of the police who showed up, and there was no violence involved. How they described what went on is, of course, that moment where you have the police approaching him, showing a fake ID, them telling him, have you been in New York recently, after they asked him to see his mask. And when he started shaking, after he had shown the fake ID, they ran the ID, realized that it wasn't real. Then he revealed himself and said he was Luigi Mangione. What's interesting here is that he is facing here in Pennsylvania the charges for illegal gun possession, for having this ghost gun without a permit, as well as for forging documents, basically that fake ID, for misrepresenting himself to authorities, and of course for other items that were found in his possession that were related to the crime. One of the questions that everybody's wondering is how long will it take for New York to file charges, but more importantly, for him to be extradited. There's two things that can happen here. He could waive his extradition and he will go to New York and face those homicide charges, or he could contest the extradition, at which point there would be other paperwork that takes place. And what we heard from police today is that that process could take anywhere between 30 and 45 days. Look, this is something that has everybody shocked. What I learned today, looking through the moment that we had a confirmation of a name of this person of interest through social media, is just how remarkable this is as a suspect. This is somebody who attended one of the 6 top boys' schools or high schools in America, according to the school, graduated, as you mentioned, valedictorian, went on to an Ivy League, has a bachelor's and a master's, according to his LinkedIn, in computer science, who became an engineer and worked in several companies, who has lived in different cities, and also who seemed to be extremely popular. I mean, all of his social media photos are surrounded by friends. He's in Hawaii. He was in Puerto Rico in 2021. He's in Cabo. He seems to have, he comes from a wealthy family, from a wealthy background, and he's fighting this fight in the most violent way imaginable. Who knows why? What we did notice is that there are some comments on social media from acquaintances, some of which have disappeared, where people seem to be concerned about his whereabouts, where people were asking, are you okay? Are you experiencing isolation? We haven't heard from you. So one of the big parts of this investigation around this suspect is what happened. How do you go from being a fraternity member with a good job as an engineer after all of that academic success, with all those friends, with family, to where we are right now? where he could be facing the rest of his life in prison.
Important questions. Lilia, Luciano, thank you. Anna Schecter joins us now. She's a senior coordinating producer for CBS News for our crime and public safety unit. And a lot has happened between the afternoon when he's still a person of interest being questioned in the case, but it feels like we're getting closer to him being named a suspect, with law enforcement there saying that they expect New York to file charges either tonight or early tomorrow. How did we get here? What is the evidence that is tying him to this killing?
Well, first of all, he's matching the photos that NYPD put out of the weekend and late last week. But also, he had on his person a pistol that was 3D printed, a silencer also 3D printed. In the police report, I just went through it. It was black. It is not clear if that is the gun he used to shoot the CEO. That remains to be seen, but there were 9mm rounds, and we know 9mm casings were found at the scene of the crime. So there's that. There's also clothing that matched what the shooter was wearing, and a laptop computer that he was sitting at McDonald's with the laptop open at a table, working on the laptop, looking at the laptop when the police walked in. He was wearing a surgical mask at that time. We know after the shooting, he switched the mask. He went from a black ski mask to a surgical mask. So he was essentially using that to evade detection. And this is now coming on 6 days. It was a 6-day investigation, which a lot of New Yorkers and people around the country were asking, how could it have taken so long? But really, it's thousands of hours of surveillance footage that police had to go through. And it wasn't until a patron at McDonald's, called or alerted a McDonald's employee who called 911 and said, we think we see the man in these photos.
Let's talk about the efforts that he took to avoid detection, because law enforcement said he was careful with trying to stay low profile and avoiding cameras. He said sometimes successfully, sometimes not, and avoiding detection with electronic devices. What more do we know about that? I mean, he was just eating in broad daylight at a public McDonald's.
That's true. They did not elaborate into that, but I imagine that he was masking that IP address on that laptop so that it wouldn't ping to him. That's one thing that he could do. A cell phone was found at the scene of the crime. We are still waiting to learn if that was in fact his cell phone. Surveillance footage a few minutes before he opened fire on the CEO showed him walking, appearing to be on the phone with the phone at his ear. We don't know if he was on a telephone call. That's a big question. That's at a forensic lab. Sometimes it can take days for the FBI to crack into a phone and get access to all of the data.
I want to mention something that Governor Shapiro had said. He said, in America, we do not kill people in cold blood to express policy differences or a viewpoint. People are frustrated with the healthcare system, but there is no tolerance for one man using an illegal ghost gun to murder someone because he thinks his opinion matters most. We are all less safe when ideologues engage in vigilante justice. Quite something to be said when we still don't fully know a motive, but this does support some of the early theories, given what was inscribed on some of the casings, that this could have been someone disgruntled with healthcare, or, as police said today, an ill will toward corporate America. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. The words that were written on those bullets, delay, deny, depose, investigators always homed in on that as pointing to a motive. Then also he had a 3-page handwritten memo that police just earlier today said was expressing ill will towards corporate America, disgruntled against people who have a lot of money, who are raking in money. And I think it will probably be learning that he's fancying himself some kind of a Robin Hood character. That's a line of questioning that we're going down. He appeared quite calm in footage that I've reviewed that showed him walking into the courthouse. He was just arraigned. So those homicide charges, by the way, could come at any time. They could even come tonight.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, what happens next? What are you waiting for and watching for?
So the New York prosecutors will file charges. Homicide charges are expected at any moment. At that time, police in Pennsylvania will then have to go through their paperwork. They need to file their own paperwork and bring it before a local judge, and then he will be offered a choice to be extradited, to waive his sort of opposition to extradition, or fight it. If he waives it, he can be transported. This could all happen very quickly, where we are seeing him arraigned in New York City tomorrow or the next day. If he fights it, that could delay it up like a month. So a lot is hanging in the balance right now. The fact that he's not cooperating might be slowing things down. It is not clear if he has a lawyer at this point. So all of these details are getting ironed out as we're sitting here right now.
Anna Schecter, thank you so much.